Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I want to discuss something that I read recently, and basically, recently enough, I've been, catching up on the Naruto I have, and last week I read Volume 38 of Naruto, and for those of you who are familiar with Viz Media and, their releases of Naruto, and of course the title of this video, you probably know already what I'm going to discuss. Basically, in this, there's a scene where, Team 7 is eating at a ramen shop, and Konohamaru shows up. He wants to show Naruto his new sexy jutsu forms, and he does his first sexy jutsu, which is, I think, the translation. I think they keep the original Japanese translation here, pretty much, like Art of Ona Noko Tachi, but I think it's somewhat translated to like Art of the Girl and Girl something. And we are introduced to this, which is silhouettes, as you can see. And then the next page we have the male and male version, which is more silhouettes. And I was kind of looking at those, and I was kind of thinking to myself, might be a decent point to just bring up in a video. Basically, there are some people who will refuse to support anything that is censored from the original Japanese version. And I used to be part of that, I will say. Mainly because, I saw what 4Kids had done to, their anime. And I was like, oh my god, this is so bad. I'm never going to support anything that's ever censored, again. But that has changed in, recent light, and I'm, kind of a bit of a devil's advocate when it comes to that now, because, there are a lot of people out there who, don't want to support anything that's censored at all. Now, concerning that, there's a couple of points I wanted to bring up. First is that it is not a plot point, it's a gag. It's a relatively minor part of, the manga. And the context of the gag, the fact that it's a girl and girl, the fact that it's a guy on guy, and in fact, even though you can't see on the guy and guy who it is, it's meant to be Sasuke and Sai, Sai does bring it up. He's like, oh, that's me and Sasuke. So the gag itself is preserved. The simple problem is that we can't see the look of the girls. We can't see the look of Sai and the look of Sasuke. But I don't really think that takes anything away from the gag. It certainly doesn't take anything away from the manga. So for me, and plus the censorship is relatively, it's a competent censorship. Silhouettes. That's kind of all we need to see. So for me, that censorship didn't really bother me at all, really. In particular because I actually knew it was coming up. I'd heard about this censorship before. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, well, it in comparison to, a lot of censorship, is actually competently handled. And it doesn't take away anything. So I was kind of thinking to myself, well, it's not that bad. So just some other examples of censorship. This one now is a bit iffy. Because it's a bit, I don't know, it kind of leaps out, censorship. It must be kind of hidden. It mustn't be obvious that it is censorship. Because if it is obvious that it is censorship, then you are going to be taken out of the story. And a good example of that would be in the first volume of Eyes. Basically, there is this scene. We are shown a picture, and the picture is of this girl. Now, this is the lead character's head photographed onto another body. We are told that, it's on a chick from a magazine, as is put. But those stars weren't there originally. And in fact, you can kind of see that you can see that they weren't there originally. One part is okay, but the star is kind of going across several parts of the body here. It's a bit awkward. And certainly when I read it, I kind of looked at it and I kind of thought to myself, oh, that's a bit of a questionable censor there. I mean, it's kind of very crudely handled, and definitely does remove you from the story. It kind of makes you look at the technique itself and kind of think to yourself, oh, this has been censored. Now, that's the only real bad censorship in all of Eyes. There is another scene which I only thought to myself as I was reading it later. Oh, maybe this was censored. So I checked the very beginning of the volume and it said it had been censored from the original Japanese edition, but it was actually a very competently handled censor. I'm not going to show it to you because that'll eat up more time, but basically they were at a spa and there was the girls there and the smoke had been arranged so that it was covering certain parts of the body. And I don't know what the original Japanese edition looked like, but it was a very clean censor. I mean, it was just covering the body, and it looked very convincingly like a part of the scene, like as if the mangaka could have drawn it himself. So it didn't take away anything from, the story. I didn't even notice it when I first read it. It was only later, after I'd read that volume, I was kind of thinking to myself, maybe that volume was censored. Maybe that scene, maybe originally the girls were, a bit more, revealed in the original version, and I checked and I saw, oh yeah, it had been censored. So that was a very competently done censor, and it didn't take away anything from the story at all. So, and it certainly didn't remove me from the story. So in that regard, it was a very successful censor. Now, some people are gonna, freak out at that. Oh, we can't see the girls' nipples and whatever else that they covered. Maybe butts. I don't know. I can't remember that. But it didn't remove anything. And I'm kind of like, okay, I'm okay with that. Now, the single worst censorship I have ever seen in a manga. Oh god, this is atrocious now. It's actually volume 23 of Hunter x Hunter. And this is awful now. Basically, Killua is fighting this bunch of chimera ants. And we are shown... Take a look at this, the chimera ant. Now, you can see his neck, but take a look at... okay, his neck's meant to be twisted. It's around up here, if you can't see. Take a look at that. It's a big black box. And that black box is very, very awkward. I mean, it's gotta be up there with the worst censorship I have ever seen in a manga. Because when I read that, it completely removed me from the story. I was just looking at it and I was going to... thank God it was near the very beginning of the book, so I hadn't gotten too deep into the story yet. That sense of kind of where you get absorbed into the story hadn't happened yet. This is literally first few pages. But by God, I mean, that when I read that... And also, take a look at this. Very next page, just kind of a... I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's a spike getting rammed through the head of the chimera ant, and that's censored again. Which is strange as well, because this is actually for older teen, which is 16 plus. 16 plus people, they should be able to handle, people's necks getting ripped off, or, a spike getting rammed into the head. And this was about 2008 as well, so I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they, decided to do that censorship for this volume, but yeah, that's the form of censorship I don't like, where it completely takes you out of the manga, it distracts you. So that's got to be the single worst. But there is something that I want to actually point out, and that is sometimes they actually rectify that in later editions. Now, you see, this is the first print of this volume. I don't know if they've reprinted this again. They may have, but they might have removed that, because here is volume 8 of Fullmetal Alchemist, and this is actually the 5th printing of this edition. Now, this volume was infamous at the time when it was originally released, because of the fact that there was a censor to do with, what's his name? Envy, I believe is the name. And that would be this bit right here. Now, the thing is, this is the uncensored version. Originally, when this was released in the English edition, This cross was actually like this kind of a rounded slab, like just a rock essentially. And actually, what's her name? Hiromu Arakawa, the author of the manga, she approved of that. She drew it herself, I think, for the English release. Because of the fact that, Americans and their sensitivity to certain religious issues, and they didn't like the idea of seeing a character getting crucified, or being crucified, or whatever you want to call it. But obviously they mustn't have, they must have thought that it was, kind of a less serious issue on later reprints. Like this reprint, it was originally released, this volume, on July 2006, but this edition is from May 2011. So between those times, they must have thought to themselves, oh, people won't freak out about it as much. So they decided to go back to the original, which is, your man on a cross, I think. Or it could have just been that they didn't, they might have accidentally used the original master for some reason. Although in all likelihood, I'm sure that would have involved a lot of work on them going back to it. So in all likelihood, it must have been themselves just kind of thinking to themselves, oh, it's okay now, so let's use the original edition. Like, that's pretty interesting. Like, I never hear people mention, oh, they went back and they corrected that. They actually removed the censorship. Another example of that might be Negima, where the very original release of Negima, the very first Del Rey ones, they were really censored apparently. But I think it wasn't until Kodansha, incorporated Del Rey and re-released it, that it got corrected. So in that case, it's kind of more of a change of publishers, if anything else. The same with Tenjo Tenge. CMX released that originally, and they censored the crap out of that. Viz picked it up later, released it uncensored. But I haven't heard of any kind of manga situations where the same publisher, releases an uncensored edition later. And not even with any fanfare, like it's the exact same look of the volume. No mention of uncensored and uncut. Usually they like to toot that if they do that, but in this case, same edition as always, just simply a later printing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So to summarize everything, my opinion on censorship, in general, if it can be uncensored, of course that would be preferred. But sometimes they want to censor them simply because of the fact that they want to be able to release it on a more widespread scale. And some people might object to that if it is uncensored. So in regards to censorship, if there's a very competent censorship method, like for example, silhouettes, which conveys the same joke as it's seen in Naruto, or later in Eyes when they're at that spa and they have the wisps of smoke or steam or whatever covering the girl's bits, it doesn't take away anything from the story. What's more problematic is, for example, at the very beginning of Eyes, that scene with the girl and the nipples and the stars, and the Hunter x Hunter bit in particular, that's got to be one of the worst censors I've ever seen, with the black squares, where it actually removes you from the story. It takes you out of the world and kind of reminds you, oh, I'm reading something. So, yeah, those censorships I'm opposed to. And of course, I haven't discussed them here at all, but any censorship that would change the context of the story, I'm opposed to. But, as long as the censorship is competent and it doesn't change any kind of context, any themes, etc., I'm kind of okay with that. And I kind of want to hear what you guys think about that, that censorship. Because I know that, the very popular opinion is, oh, any censorship, I'm not going to buy it. But I do think that up to a point it's okay. And I want to hear what you guys think about that. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.